Jamie Yellard.
Here.
Pete Peterson.
Present.
Suzanne LaPrance.
Here.
Forrest Dunbar.
Here.
Felix Rivera.
Present.
John Weddleton.
Here.
Christopher Constant.
Here.
Crystal Kennedy.
Here.
Cameron Perez Verdilla.
Here.
Palatel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to invite up Carl Jacobs and Pat Higgins to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, too. Next, we have the Land Acknowledgement. Mr. Constant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It's an actionable statement that marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be stewards of this land. It is with gratitude and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to our special orders today. First, we have the certification of the April 6th, 2021 regular municipal election. Mr. Weddleton, is that you in the queue?
That is me in the queue. I'd like to change the order of the day. And two steps. One would be to move audience participation to the first thing, and then to move assembly comments to precede 4C, assembly reorganization.
Is there a second?
Second. Second.
All right, so just to reiterate, that would be to take item number 5 on the agenda, move it before 4A, and then take number 6 on our agenda and move it before 4C. Is that correct?
Correct, thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Mr. Weddleton, if you want to speak to it.
We don't have a lot of people in the audience. I think they're here waiting to speak, and we have a short agenda, so I think there's nothing lost, and perhaps they'll enlighten us and sway our opinions at the other steps of the meeting. So I'd welcome that. Assembly reorganization is typically not debatable, so having assembly comments prior to that would be a good opportunity to speak to any variety of things.
Okay. All right, I'm just double checking. I don't see anyone else in the queue on this motion. So seeing no one else in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to change the order of the day.
Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla.
Yes.
All right, that motion is approved 7-3, so the order of the day has been changed. So with that, next we're going to take up audience participation. Just like normal, we're going to do 3 folks over the phone, 3 in person. So we're going to go ahead and start with 3 on our phone list, starting with Mr. Niall Williams.
You've reached Niall Williams. Sorry I have missed your...
We will try him again later. Next, we have Jonathan Marsh.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Marsh. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on audience participation. You have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Hi, 1 second here.
You still with us, sir? No? Okay. Can we go ahead and try him again? Thanks.
Call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message.
You tried it, it just switched to voicemail? Okay, we can come back to him later then. Next, we are going to try Mr. Ivan Hodes. And then Mr. Marsh, if you're listening, we'll come back to you in a little bit.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Hodes. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on audience participation. You have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Ivan Hodes. I'm a constituent, or I'm a citizen of Eagle River. And I wanted to speak about the continuing inappropriate behaviors of my assemblywoman. And I've been hesitant to raise this before because, as most of you know, I've had some negative interactions with her. She's apologized to me, and I took that and I take that sincerely. And this is not about the personal relationship between the two of us. It's about the fact that she doesn't seem to have learned her lessons. I still see her referring to herself as representing the Republicans in her district or the conservatives in her district. She just has not got the message that she represents all of Eagle River, and when she acts in the way that she has recently, it embarrasses her constituents, not just her Republican or conservative constituents, but all of us. I just feel that she has an attitude that whatever she says is correct, and therefore any criticism of her is inherently illegitimate. The posturing that she does about process, characterizing these attacks as a misuse of process are hollow because she is completely unafraid to use her position of authority to silence others. For example, in the aftermath of the incident regarding the Nazi license plates some months ago, she actually contacted my employers at my place of work and told them that I was harassing her constituents when, of course, I was doing no such thing. Those concerns were dismissed. I ran into no trouble, but it just shows that Representative Ballard is entirely willing to use her power and influence to silence others, and yet tries to cry foul when she's not silenced. She's not silenced. She's just expected to follow parliamentary procedure, expected to do the things that befit a member of the assembly, and not attacked. She's not attacked. Her words are criticized, so she can dish it out. She can dish it out all of the time, but she cannot take it, and I would like a representative who has a more mature understanding of her role as an elected official. Thank you.
Thanks. Never mind. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go ahead and switch to in person. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Michelle, and I'm a blue-collar worker, and talk about someone using their power to silence people. That's what I witnessed last Tuesday. Talk about somebody who only works in one direction. I would say that would be our chairperson standing in front of me. I've seen him dismiss conservative people while letting the left-wingers have their way. I pointed out Constant and mentioned his name, and you called me off. You cut me off. But yet what you did last week not only was attacking, you cut the mic, you dismissed free speech. You said some words should never be spoken, and some people should never live in Anchorage. So I implore upon the rest of you, which I don't have a lot of faith in because I feel like there are no adults in the room except for one, maybe two. You need to reorganize. We need somebody who is balanced, who is respectful, who won't just take it upon himself to push propaganda before public testimony and then not adjust the time and then have a person arrested because they're upset that you didn't give us our additional 15 minutes. We need someone who's not going to just up and decide that tonight we're only going to have 2 minutes worth of public testimony and cut off Trina with Vomex. We need someone who is calm, who is respectful, and can bring calm and respect from the people who are attending. Felix, you wind people up because you dismiss us. You dismissed me the first time I showed up last October. You dismissed me. So I implore upon the rest of you, please reconsider organizing and putting somebody that's far more neutral in the position of chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is James Wojciechowski, W-O-J-C-I-E-H-O-W-S-K-I. I live on the East Hillside, District 5, represented by Peterson and Dunbar. The earlier caller from Eagle River, I would like to tell him that, if I could speak to him, that he's kind of lucky if his representative actually engages with him. I've gotten one email response from one of my representatives, and I believe 2 from the other. Those 2 were respectful. The other one was a snark, and that's fine. I can deal with that. I probably deserve it. I mean, I've been hammering you guys for 6 months. But with the hammer came journal articles. They weren't USA Today, CNN, blah, blah, blah. And I honestly can't believe that I found myself in alignment with Bill Maher this week. I know I send you a lot of emails, but I would really love to see a show of hands, if you could just do it. How many of you guys actually watched that 7 minutes that I sent you? Oh, I got 2. I got a nod. I couldn't see the rest. Okay. He nailed it. He absolutely nailed it. 80%, over 80% of the mainstream media coverage of COVID is panic porn. It's all about driving a narrative to keep everybody terrified. So let's just toss out some facts. I'm not even looking at this thing. Let's toss out some facts. Over 80% of those who died with a COVID-related diagnosis in the state of Alaska were over 65 years of age. Hey, I'm 67. I lucked out. I appreciate it. I really do. Now I'm double vaccinated, but I'm still supposed to wear a mask, which makes 0 sense, but I'm not going to go down that road because I've given you tons of emails about that as well. What I would also like to point out is if you look at the immunization rates in the state of, or in the Muni, for those over 65, right now, it's almost 80%. You have absolutely no reason to have us locked down. I'm sorry, harsh word. To have any mandates or restrictions whatsoever. None. The chair brought up Texas during the little battle at the end of the deal. And you made a statement that was inaccurate, sir. You said Texas has increasing case counts. Not true. They're plummeting since the mask mandate and restrictions were taken away. I've sent you all emails. I gave them to you daily. Yeah. Anyway, standard operation procedure, 3 minutes over. Thank you. Over and out.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Charles McKee. I am the beneficiary of the McKee Trust, and I'd like to point out the fact that I was on record earlier testifying in the House Bill 145 to give pharmacists more latitude in their daily lives and the compensation that they should be receiving. Now, with that, Governor Dunleavy vetoed Medicaid, Medicare July 2019. I raced in the hospital July the 7th. No money available. So the Doctors and Nurses Association sues the governor, and they set out of court October the 2nd. That was the day Judge Nesbitt and Judge Hanley shoved me into public defender agency, so they muffled me. My $80 million that I'm requesting for harm and remedy disappears. So that was very convenient that they can take credit out of my account, which they're the trustees. You've heard me whining about that. They're the trustees, I'm the beneficiary, the judge is trustee, the clerk's the trustee. And I announced that to them. Deborah Jean Blatchford witnessed that. She was an agent for the court. She was there September the 20th, 2019. She witnessed that. When I didn't die from sepsis because I was contaminated in the hospital, July the 17th, went back October the 15th, and walked out with pharmacy prescription from the ER October the 16th and said, as soon as they open up, go to the pharmacy and get this prescription filled. They released me with sepsis. I went into sepsis shock. So now I find myself in the parking lot of Fred Meyer going to the pharmacist. He looks at it. I don't have $200. So I walk back out in the parking lot. The next thing I know, ER doctor, a nurse is calling me, would you come back to the hospital? You see, they had a camera on me. The pharmacist knew what I was trying to buy, but I didn't have the money. He knew I was going to die out in the parking lot. Fred Meyer did not want that to happen. So they asked me to come back into the hospital, and they kept me there at ICU for 2.5 days. So when I didn't die, that's when turned Blatchford into signing this, recognizing God had his hand on me, and that was the only reason why I was still alive to this day.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and go back to the phones and try people for the second time. So first we'll start with Mr. Williams.
You've reached Niall Williams. Sorry.
Then next we will go with Mr. Marsh.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Marsh. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on audience participation. You have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Hi there. Hello. My name is Jonathan Marsh, and I'm a South Anchorage resident. I feel obligated to condemn the recent comments from the Assembly member from Eagle River regarding the illegal immigrants at the Texas border. Frankly, I'm not sure why the border situation was even brought up. It had nothing to do with travel between the lower 48 and Alaska, and it had nothing to do with what the individual testifying at the time was speaking about. Frankly, this sounded like an attempt to push an anti-illegal immigrant agenda for no other reason than to shift the understandable backlash from many in the U.S. who aren't taking COVID precautions seriously, and as a result are seeing their areas, such as parts of Texas, spike in cases. Besides the fact that Alaska has nothing to do with the southern border, so whatever issues they face there are not consequential here. I realize many of us have different ideas and different priorities on how to proceed forward with community issues in these challenging times. But I agree that off-the-cuff, reckless comments like the above do no help and only perpetuate fear, division, and a harmful stereotype that hurts many in our community. We are better than this. Free speech is indeed guaranteed. In exchange for that, there are always consequences for speech that is flat out inappropriate and in poor taste. This will be the case no matter who is part of this body and community. I'm thankful that these words were held accountable and implore we stay on topic for the sake of our productivity and the many needs that need to be met at each meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and go back to in-person. That completes our phone list. Welcome.
I have a quick question before my time begins. Is there a possibility that I could make a preface to the kind of speech that I have to the body?
You can use your time, your 3 minutes, how you would like.
Okay, well then I'll skip the preface. First name is Jordan, last name Harari, representing myself. I'd like to talk about the speech Assemblymember Rivera had last Tuesday with Representative Allard and cast it under a new light, the light of bullying and virtue signaling. Mr. Rivera said he was, quote, forced to respond to Assemblymember Allard's comments that they were deserving of further critique. He continued by saying he is typically not one to make scathing critiques of other members' comments, but that he was making a notable exception that night. Then he began waxing poetic by quoting Thaddeus Stevens in the movie Lincoln, quote, some of us breathe oxygen and we find the mephitic fumes of his oratory a lethal challenge to our pulmonary capabilities. Assemblymember Rivera, you said that you couldn't speak to Assemblymember Allard's intent. Well, how fitting it is that I speak of yours, as you made it so painfully clear for all of us. Let us break this down one by one. First, the fact that you were forced to respond and then quoted comments from your constituents and added the term xenophobic. By stating all this, you clearly inferred that you also think she made xenophobic comments, but instead of calling that out yourself, you hid behind your constituents. This is something a bully does, and it is a passive-aggressive act, both of which have no place in this assembly. How many emails and comments does Assemblymember Allard get about you stating that you're a racist or a bigot or this or that? I don't know. But I bet you real money it's more than 0. And yet, has she done what you did? No. Chew on that for a while. Next up, we have the Thaddeus Stevens quote. Here you are propping yourself up on a pedestal. Some of us breathe oxygen. First, that you and others have, in the some of us, are too good for the likes of you, Miss Allard, an elected member, representative of your constituents. We don't breathe in our own noxious gas, no, and we certainly don't breathe in the likes of yours. It hurts our extremely delicate and refined sensibilities. Please. You like to speak of facts, sir? Well, here's a fact. You are virtue signaling. And for those that don't know what it is, the dictionary definition is literally this, quote, the sharing of one's point of view on a social or political issue, often on social media, in order to garner praise or acknowledgement of one's righteousness from others who share that point of view or to passively rebuke those who do not, end quote. It seems to fit perfectly here. Does this remind any of us when we were bullied in school? It does, doesn't it? I really hope you weren't bullied as a child, Mr. Rivera. I wish that on no one, but if you were, you acted like that which you probably hated back then. Does that scare you? It should. You further spoke about her comments, quote, not having a place in Anchorage. Well, neither do yours. And my favorite quote from your speech that night, quote, I implore the member from Chugiak Eagle River refrain from making misinformed comments that stoke fear, division, and hatred in our community. It's not representative of who we are as a community and frankly reflects poorly on us as a body. Enough is enough, end quote. Indeed, enough is enough. You acted exactly like that which you espoused to hate, and all your speech did was stoke exactly what you claimed to want to avoid. There were many ways and opportunities to try to resolve what you felt like it was an issue, and to be the bigger man, like reminding Miss Allard of her right to exercise an appeal of the ruling of the chair, but that didn't happen. The biggest bully of the night, sir, was you. I know I speak on behalf of myself and many others when I say that we call on you to willingly step down from that assembly seat. It's time to replace that seat in our district with someone who leads our community and doesn't think of himself better than or bully them. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. It's on. Yep.
Hi, my name is Margaret Douglas. I was here last week. And I've got to say, I am really surprised at all of you. You're acting like little kids, like little 2-year-olds, attacking Miss Howler. You don't like it, so why should she? Yeah, I was bullied all my life because I wasn't like the others. I don't believe in going around hurting other people just for the fun of it, or so it can raise myself up above them. And when I'm seeing this, what you're doing. And this absolute need for power. I got news for you. That's what's going to put you in your grave, in an early grave. Miss Eller, stay strong, because I guarantee you, they hate what we stand for, and they will continue to do what they're doing to make them look good. And they will do anything and everything they can think of to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Can you turn on the mic, please? It's off. There you go, it's on.
It's on now. My name is Prince Wankudu. I'm the president of Revive Alaska Community Services. I just feel like I walked into a beehive here because the last time I testified, I did over the phone, so I didn't know there were a lot of rancor going on, but I think I brought a message of hope for the less privileged in the community. And I hope this is the right time to talk about what I'm here to talk about. I represent the Revive Alaska Community Services, and we have a Revive Alaska food pantry, and it's the only food pantry active in South Anchorage. And the COVID-19 pandemic affected many working Anchorage residents who lost their jobs and businesses, thereby increasing food insecurity in Anchorage. Many families that are struggling to make ends meet have found help by getting food from our pantry. We serve about 50 families per week, distributing approximately 1,500 pounds of food monthly to Anchorage residents. We've also come alongside the school district to cater for children in transition whose parents have lost their jobs or don't have enough money to feed their families, and there are about 500 homeless families in this category. This speech today just to reemphasize the request we have sent, the proposal we have sent to each of the members of the Assembly with regards to the American Recovery Act funding issue. And we are requesting funding for repair, expansion, and upgrade of the food pantry because just last week our roof caved in due to the weight of melting snow. And this has forced us to shut down the main pantry, and we're just using a part of it right now and serving about 10% of our capacity. So we have sent this out, and I wanted to just come and put a face to the letter we wrote. And thank you, Felix, the chair. You replied us that you're going to make sure it gets into the mix for discussion. And also Meg acknowledged receiving the email. So I just wanted to talk to everyone, particularly the assemblymen representing the South Anchorage, Waterton, and La France to support this request because we serve the whole of the Anchorage municipality, but particularly the South Anchorage. And our major focus is the working poor. And again, to reemphasize that this is a minority-led organization whereby in most cases we are left out when there are issues of grants, issues of resources. So I plead with every member of the Assembly to please consider our proposal when it comes to the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself, Alaska resident for 43 years, 20 of those years Anchorage resident, and currently a Matsu Valley resident. It really concerns me. The topic that we should be addressing is dealing with the certification of the election tonight. That's one of the two most important decisions a governing body has to make. The other one is approving the budget annually. What are we doing? We got a cloud going on here and a discussion about behavior among accusations among assembly members and so forth. This is appropriate but not in this way, because it's a distraction dealing with the election and ensuring that things are done right. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a continued pattern in the election part. It's still not going right. Why? Thank you, Assemblymember Wellington. You allowed for audience participation to be moved up. But year after year, you certify the election as Assembly members, and then you change seats, and then the end result is you call for public comment. So this is the first time in years I'm able to address concerns before you make a decision. And note this, it violates state law, providing a reasonable opportunity to the public be heard. I did attend meetings. The Canvas meeting Friday night was rather lengthy. And there's categories in there of concern. 881 was noted on the Canvas report dealing with no signature match. The result of addressing that issue, the clerk explained how they handled the signatures. The envelopes and stuff were not brought before the commission. It was on the statement by the clerk of how this was handled, and the commission just went on and said, okay, we'll accept that report. But the standard is the commission takes a look at each of those envelopes before making a decision, and allows for public comment. A big change, respectfully, at the last meeting, Friday, was an opportunity for public comment on each of those categories. And some of them, I went up there. Previous years, I did not have a chance. That was a remarkable, great change, and respectfully, it was done right. And then the last thing, there's another item here dealing with postmarks. To the public, I did not know this, that if you mail it that same day, there's no guarantee that your envelope is going to be postmarked by the post office. That's a warning that should be included, and that's not been included. And then you had an election commission meeting today. Extension of the canvas. Remote. Commissioners were remote, not physically present, and they changed the numbers without any opportunity for a real opportunity of transparency, and that was despicable. And I close with this. Tonight you have the certification, and when is this brought out? It's put out there about a couple minutes before or after the meeting. How can you have time to read this? And it's not part of the packet. You cannot approve certification tonight. You didn't give a fair chance for the public to be connected as well.
Your time is up. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Tammy Smith, and I'm here to talk about the Code of Ethics. Assemblymember Rivera, your actions and conduct on Wednesday, April 14th, 2021 violated the Code of Ethics, and you continue to breach the public's trust in your official capacity as an assembly member. The cancel culture and hypocrisy is very blatant. Rivera, you verbally attacked Assemblymember Allard, stating you cannot speak to the intent, but you called her a xenophobic for comments she made the night before about the crisis at the border. The comments made by Ms. Allard do not in any way merit the tongue lashing and the conduct by yourself. Let us not forget how the rest of the assembly members disrespect their constituents during meetings by mocking, belittling, shaming, and walking out. Yes, you, Dunbar, who wants to be our next mayor. During public testimony, which also breaches the public's trust. The truth of the matter is, Rivera, that you are targeting Assemblymember Allard for opposing viewpoints with the rest of the assembly. I am appalled and shocked that not one assembly member called for a point in order to stop the bullying and the personal attacks by Rivera. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. In addition, Constance's behavior is yet just another example of breaching the Code of Ethics. You stated the member failed to exercise her right to appeal the ruling of the chair properly, and the member is the one who failed to act properly. If Allard's mic had not been turned off by you, Rivera, maybe she could have appealed the ruling of the chair properly. Assemblymember Allard is the most consistent constituent, conservative voice and for the Assembly and seen by her constituents as champion for personal liberties and our conservative values on the Assembly run by a progressive leftist Assembly. Because of this, Allard is under attack and pressure by the opposing Assembly. You do not agree with us, therefore you are pushing your views onto the people you serve, attacking Ms. Allard. Why? Because you think it's in the best interest of the people. In reality, it's nothing more than pure evil, cancel culture, and hypocrisy. The rule of the Assembly is that no member may denigrate another member and imply that member's motives, but the rule didn't apply to you, Rivera. If anyone is stoking fear, division, and hatred in our community, it is the acting mayor and the Assembly with the exception of a few. It is representative of who you are as a community and frankly reflects poorly on you as a body. The comments made by Rivera are baseless and a complete abuse of power. The Assembly chair must stop the cancer culture and hypocrisy. And Jamie, thank you for serving and fighting for our personal liberties and our values as the Assembly is run by the progressive leftists. And
Ma'am, your time is up. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm not here to speak about the huge ethics violation of Felix. That would be a waste of my 3 minutes. The election fraud issues will fall on deaf ears, but I will want to say a couple of brief things about that. I have firsthand knowledge of an 82-year-old friend that lives in District 4. His ballot did not give him an option to vote for the recall. Also, I have a friend that lives there in District 4. She and her son, 20, live in District 4. She got a ballot. She had the option to vote for the recall. Her son did not. I'm not sure probably any of you care about that, but that is truly something that should be looked into. But I'm really not here for any of that. I'm here to thank you. I really want to thank you because you see, your malicious, tyrannical dictatorship over our city has ignited people to wake up, to stand up, and to begin to take action. We are tired of your personal agendas. You may mistakenly think that the only people unhappy are those that show up and speak up, but let me assure you that is not the case. Virtually everyone I speak to, and I'm out and about a lot, despise the lockdown and says it's time to open up. Being told what to do and expecting us to take it, such as purchasing buildings when, where, and whomever you choose, not listening to the community. I've worked with the homeless for 15 years. More buildings is not going to answer that. They just will not. And then again, the tactic of 70% requirement to have a vaccine. Who are you people, especially the acting mayor, to take away a freedom? That's not freedom at all. Your agendas have included horrendous misappropriation of COVID funds, total disrespect to anyone who stands here and speaks, having some of members even laugh and mock at public testimony while they're being said. And yet you call us out, Rivera, those in attendance, for responding with disapproval and statements being spoken. I'm not sure how that works. You may laugh us off, but we are making our way from this mic, and you're going to hear the resurgent of the roar of the people. We are tired of being locked down. We are tired of being treated like your little minions. To listen to your reckless mandates, your control, and more self-righteous attitudes. David only needed one stone to defeat Goliath. He went to the battle with 5 stones, and the only reason is because Goliath had 4 other brothers. But David only needed one stone to awaken the others that God truly is the victor in any and every battle. I believe God will have the victory over our city, and it will be the people, not your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question for you from Mr. Weddleton.
2 questions. One, I didn't get your name.
Teresa Langberg.
Teresa, thanks, Teresa. So we are interested in issues that you brought up regarding the ballot, for sure. Could you contact the elections? And
I have told them what to do, yes. They're following the procedure. But they haven't had any responses. My senior friend has not had a call back.
Yeah, they will, because they are looking at.
But you're going to certify the election, so is it really going to make a difference?
It can, yeah. We'll talk about what certification
Okay.
means. So, thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to hear from the clerk on this point. We can do it either now or we can do it at the time of certification, but I want to know, and I want to know, I want to know this information. So could this clerk speak to this?
Through the chair, the MOA elections has a very complicated process, but it works to assign ballot styles to different voters. We've worked with the municipality's GIS department, and so we have a map of Anchorage. And then on top of that map, it's got all of the assembly splits. We have 177 ballot styles because we have 23 LRSAs or RRSAs, local road improvement districts or rural road improvement districts or the Girdwood Board of Supervisors. So we have a lot of ballot styles and it's really complicated. So there's all these little divisions. And then what we do is we take the state voter registration database and lay that on top of it based on voters' registered address in the state voter database as of 30 days before the election. So that's where voters are qualified to vote. Or, unfortunately, for some people, if they didn't update their registration or if they moved after that 30 days, they're probably not eligible to vote in some races or contests on the ballot. So for example, if you lived in Girdwood and then you moved, so you lived and you're registered in Girdwood, and then you moved, your registered address is Girdwood, and when you come to a vote center to get a ballot, you do not get to vote in that Girdwood Board of Supervisors race because you don't live there anymore. So that's kind of my map story. And then what happens is we take that information and we assign a ballot style to every voter. So we got 177 of those. And so I don't even know what my ballot style is, but so what happens is voters get mailed the ballot style based on where they live at that time. So there's a sample ballot style map on the website, and I've gotten this question from a couple of assembly members, including Miss Allard, and I got it from a candidate who was concerned about this. And I sent them the sample ballot style map, and there's also in our maps and apps gallery, there's an assembly district map, and I've told people, go to the sample ballot style map, you just have to put in your address. And you put in your address, and it'll pop up your sample ballot. So you can look at your sample ballot and it'll show you what you're supposed to vote on. So you can also check the assembly district map and say, hey, this says I'm in District 3, but I know I'm in District 2. So what I need voters to do is do this work, call me up and say, there's a mistake here, and then we can figure out what the error is and find out why they may have gotten what they believe is a wrong ballot style. So that's one part of it. I can tell you that I've gotten a number of inquiries, but I have not heard from one single voter that showed me on the map that they lived in one district and got the wrong ballot style. So that has not happened. even though I've let people know this is how you need to notify us of that. And then the other thing I'll tell you, we have a 24-hour rule in the clerk's office and in the elections team. And that means that we return phone calls and emails within 24 hours. And so every so often, one slips through the cracks. I will tell you that. We're not perfect, but we sure try. Voting is really important, and we know the answers to these questions are really important, and people need to know now. So I do not have any outstanding calls from anyone regarding this issue that I know of, and I've been answering a lot of calls and a lot of emails lately. So you're going to have to ask them to give us a call again. Our email address is elections@anchorageak.gov, and the voter hotline is 243-8683-243-VOTE. And if they give us a call, we'll help them out with that. Again, the sample ballot map is on the website. People can check it out themselves, and if they have a concern or don't agree with it, they can give us a call.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I say something?
Sure, briefly, if you can.
Okay, so these two individuals that I've talked about, they have lived in District 4 for over 2 years each. So in addition to, so they shouldn't be overlaid, and I appreciate your explanation, but they've lived in the district for quite some time. And in addition to calling you and telling you, my husband and I have lived in our home for 7 years, and every year, no exception, we have 4+ extra ballots with different names coming. We do not inform you until after the election, hoping that nobody will vote for these people. I mean, we could if we were, but you have not changed that. So I appreciate that you have a huge job, but I don't think you're doing it very well. But thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jamelia George. I live in Midtown, and I'm here tonight representing myself. I am deeply disappointed, Mr. Rivera, by your actions of last week. I have more than a passing acquaintance with Robert's Rules of Order. So you're supposed to be my expert on that, because you're chair. So I ask you, sir, by what rule did you cut the mic off of a duly elected sitting assembly member?
So as I have stated previously multiple times during audience participation, it is the norm of this body to not respond to comments or questions in the middle of audience participation, but we can do so after.
Well, I will just tell you that when you cut someone's mic off, they can't call a point of order, but you knew that. I'm disappointed in you. I expected better from you. When you overcame the recall, I thought he's going to show us some good stuff. And you did, just the wrong stuff, Mr. Rivera. I don't think you respect your fellow assembly members, and I know you don't respect the citizens. The Planning and Zoning Board is making decisions and recommendations to the Assembly about rezoning every neighborhood in this town. It is a non-transparent method. I have emailed, I have written, and I have called, and I get no response. I've left messages for you and Ms. Zelatel, and I get no response. More disappointingly, I don't know how this assembly is going to hold this city together if they don't start publicly acting like adults. And I'm serious about that, sir. You should be ashamed. I think the city has a bigger problem with the voting. Madam Clerk, I understand you have a very important job and a very burdensome job. It's a behemoth of a problem, but it has to get fixed. I don't know if the solution is in-person voting, so you know you get the right ballot. But if it doesn't work, take the wheels off of it and look at the engine. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Laurie Savitt. I live in College Village, and I'm here individually. I would like to discuss the behavior of the chair of this committee, Rivera, as well. I think it's appalling that you would attack a fellow member of this committee, break the rules of the committee, and cut off her microphone so that she was unable to respond. This was outright bullying, and it just should not be allowed here. You squeaked through a recall, and now you seem to think that you can break the rules. I find this is just incredible. I say to the rest of the members here that not one person spoke up to challenge his behavior, and shame on all of you. I further say that we need a new person in that chair, because the person who sits there now abuses the power of that chair. Now, regarding the topic that Ms. Allard was trying to discuss when you so rudely called her names and cut her off, I would like to say that before moving here in September of 2019, I was a resident of Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is in southern New Mexico. So I am well aware of the problems near the southern border. You clearly are not. I can only correct Ms. Allard's statement by saying the situation is more than an infiltration. It is an outright invasion of foreign people into our country. The problems of human trafficking, drugs entering our country, child abuse of all types, and violent crime are all too real in the border states and increasing as the flow of illegal aliens, there I said it, increases. You should do your homework and learn what you're talking about before you call someone xenophobic. Wake up from your woke stupor and learn the truth, because the woke stupor of people here not only hurts our country, but it absolutely hurts this city.
Thank you. Welcome. No, it is off now. Yellow button, and then it'll be back on. Yellow button on the mic. Kiana, can read.
Yeah, last week you said that we won't have a summer unless we get vaccines. That's kind of BS because...
Can you state your name for the record?
Yeah, my name is Brian Stashik.
Thanks.
Last 2 weeks ago you said that no one's allowed to have a summer unless we can get vaccinated. That's kind of BS because I'm going to have a summer without vaccination, and these people behind me are going to have a summer, and we're not going to listen to anyone on this area because we know what a summer is without vaccinations, and we can follow our own thoughts and we can govern ourselves to do what we want during summers. We don't need anybody help on the assembly because you're being rude, y'all being rude, and you're not listening to us, and this vaccination is BS, and the rules and the emergencies we're getting tired of it, and it's getting ridiculous, and we're going to have our own summer without any of your help, without any of the rules. We're going to make our own rules and enjoy the summer without the vaccinations. And these men in the emergency orders is ridiculous. And there's no COVID funds going to small businesses, and they shut down. They will never reopen because it's hard for them to reopen. They put a lot of money in the years past. And where was Governor Dunley when we've been hurting this whole time? He's been hiding. Governor Dunleavy's been hiding. And he's not helping. He's just been hiding somewhere. We don't know where he is. He's not being a true governor. And no one's helping us on this assembly. And it's ridiculous. We're going to follow our own rules during the summer. We're not going to listen to any of you anymore.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Assembly members. My name is Chevy, and I want to talk about the elections. First thing, I dispute a little bit what Ms. Jones said. I've been waiting for a couple of months for a request. I asked a question about why do we use the state of Alaska voter rolls in Anchorage, Alaska. There's no reason. I've lived in a lot of places in my life, and I've never lived in a city where they didn't have their own voter rolls. It would make your job so much easier if you would confine the area to the people that are actually voting. I asked that request the 1st of February, I asked again in the middle of March, both in verbally and in writing, no response. I feel that I'm very concerned about the way the elections were handled because I did a short poll observation, and in with a very short time, 5 people came in and said, I never got my ballot. I've lived in the same place for 31 years, and I've never missed an election, and I never got a ballot. We need to end this mail-in ballot because it doesn't work. Nobody gives their ballot. Some people do, some people don't. I was campaigning, and I talked to people from Michigan and Tennessee and Oklahoma, Oregon, Washington, you name it, states all over the place where people hadn't lived here in 15 years. So that is a huge opportunity for fraud because nobody knows who's voting. The records are so outdated and no one seems to be concerned, but I am concerned because I don't understand how my poll observers at the City Hall, they said everybody there that was working was asking everybody and double checking where they lived to make sure they could vote for the recall of Felix Rivera. At City Hall, I asked my poll observers, I had different shifts of people, and they said nobody asked them. So I feel like there was some voter suppression. I feel like when I was doing petitions, people were grabbing them out of my hand to recall you. So I'm very concerned about the way that vote went because it didn't go with what I was experiencing in talking to many people. Your performance has it's been troubling to a lot of us, and I would like this assembly, last week, Mr. Verda said, oh, you guys are just rude. You guys are just rude. You come in here, you scream your fist. Well, we've tried talking to you. We've tried phoning and emailing. We don't get responses. We try raising our voice. With this body, please explain to us how do we communicate to you people so that you will listen, so that we will be heard, because what we're doing isn't working. We're trying something different. I haven't heard from my assembly person in over 8 months. When I've left messages, I gave up trying. Tell us, how is it appropriate to communicate with you people? When I had my poll observers in at the election, one poll observer...
Apologies for interrupting, ma'am, but your time is up. Thank you.
Done.
You can feel free to email us if you have a written statement. You can email us the statement.
Oh, and how long will that take to get answered, Felix?
Thank you. I actually do have a question from Ms. Allard.
Can you tell me your experience with your poll observers, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. One poll observer, my understanding of a poll observer is that it's their opportunity to do their patriotic duty and their privilege as a citizen of the United States of America to observe while ballots are being processed, while signatures are being verified. So everyone has a sense of confidence that what is happening is correct and legit. And one poll observer told me that he felt like, even though he thought he was there to do the observing, he felt like he was the one being observed. So there's something really wrong with that. And also, they had us stand 6 feet away, which you really can't observe. What are they doing to match those signatures? We were not allowed to see what we need to see. And I'm not saying that anything, we just don't know because we weren't allowed to see. And I felt like I myself wasn't allowed to go in because I have a health condition, and I wasn't allowed to go in, and I felt like even in the state they allow you to wear a shield, but I wasn't allowed, so that right was taken away from me. I wanted a chance to see how the election process works, because there's, especially after November 3rd, I mean, we all felt like we're still bearing from the rubble. And some of the things that they told us were, they said, oh, it's really secure, the the system isn't hooked up to the internet. But
Mr.
one
Chair.
observer said that when they were verifying the signatures.
I need to pause you really quick. Mr. Constant?
The question was about observers, and now we're talking about voting machines.
Well, it's related, Mr.
I actually
Constant.
do have a second question for you from Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Oh, actually, I just wanted to thank you for coming out tonight and speaking, and I wanted to apologize to you and anyone else that got the impression that I was saying that you were rude. That was not my intent. But I wanted to thank you for coming out tonight and speaking. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because I really think there needs to be a better way to communicate. I've been coming to these meetings since June. The same thing happens. We come up here, we pour out our heart and soul, and at the end we say, well, our constituents say this. When you've just heard 60 people pour their heart out, yep. Where are your ears? I mean, how do we communicate? Please, could you guys issue something publicly to tell us how do we get through so that we aren't having this? We don't like it. We'd rather be doing something else. I'm sure you guys aren't just sick of hearing the same thing, but we have to find a way to come together and communicate in a meaningful way so we feel heard and you guys can represent us the way we need to be represented. And just listening and do as we ask. Let us live our life. And back into the issue of...
Actually,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you.
I'm not done answering her question, Felix.
I think you did answer her question, but I appreciate your speaking before us.
Thank you. I appreciate the attention of the body.
Welcome.
My name is Beth Abisrohr, and I am a resident of District 4. Mr. Rivera, I was thoroughly appalled by your behavior during final Assembly member comments at the end of the 4/14 Wednesday night continued meeting. It was a shameful display of passive-aggressive cowardice. As a member of your constituency, you are supposed to represent me. Instead, you embarrass me. As the acting chair of the Assembly, you're supposed to lead by example. Instead, you misuse your elevated position to break the rules. You survived your recall, but have not gained humility from the experience. I must give you credit. Your statement last Tuesday night on 4/13 was accurate. Your moral compass has not been broken or tampered with. You're still the same caliber of a person who feels it is appropriate for a man in a position of power to break the rules that control the behavior of others. You are the type of person who believes it is appropriate to verbally attack a woman when you believe she won't have the opportunity to fight back. You are the type of person who feels empowered by slandering a veteran in public. You are the type of person who chooses to embarrass a colleague instead of having a respectful offline conversation to discuss your concerns. If you expect the public to follow your arbitrary rules of decorum and show you any respect, you need to start leading by example. I don't care what you do or who you are friends with during your own personal time, but when you are at work as a member of the Assembly, you are supposed to represent me and the other residents of District 4. We expect better behavior from you. The Assembly meetings are not your meetings, they are our meetings. Those meetings belong to the public. We have elected you and the other sitting members to represent us. I am also extremely disappointed in the other members for not standing up to stop you during your tirade. You had someone arrested on Tuesday night for using his free speech at the wrong time and with the wrong volume, which broke your rules. But during the continued meeting, you used your free, uncensored speech, which you acknowledged would break the rules, without consequence. Can you even see the hypocrisy in this? Should we have you trespassed from the library for refusing to follow the rules of decorum? Please take a step back and reflect upon the past year. Do you have any idea how difficult it was to get a recall question on the ballot during the dead of winter during a global pandemic? Your behavior over the past year has inspired contempt in a large percentage of our community. I can assure you this was not AstroTurf. This was not an army of conservatives bitter over Christine Hill's loss. This was pure grassroots from an unhappy constituency that unfortunately was no match for the flood of dark outside money that saved your hide. We are trying to work with you. You snub us at every turn. Please get back to work and behave in a dignified way that honors your position and the entire constituency. I wholeheartedly support the reorganization on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Roy Witchers, and I remember not long ago when leaders actually listened to the people and found a way to work with them. I was here 30 years ago in front of a very liberal Democrat named Mark Begich, and he proposed a tax on homeowners' septic tanks. Groundswell got going, and within weeks, we were here at the assembly meeting, made our statements, told them exactly how we felt, and within days after that, it was taken off the ballot, idea scrapped. He knew it was wrong, and he listened to the people. That's something that's not happening here. Hasn't for a year. Anyway, he realized it was a big mistake. Assembly goes through the actions of leadership and leaders when it's convenient to one, except for one, Jamie Allard. She actually listens. She has principles, honor, and stands by those, unlike the rest of you. And I know there's a few little exceptions, but overall, it's a pretty big cabal up there. It was really, what you did to Jamie Allard, you violated her rights, not only her constitutional rights, but as an assembly member, part of the group that is supposed to represent, she represents a district, and you cut them off at the same time you cut her off. And that's wrong. We get so frustrated. This is over a year we've been dealing with not just the problem, but you're the problem. That's what's going on. This is supposed to be a representative government. The arrogance of the chair is just another example of not allowing the public to participate in our own lives. This same attitude that has led to our city and lives to degrade to, very bad. The bus depot, you name it, downtown is boarded up, shut down. That's right here. And the mayor that did his little thing and he resigned, a smart boy. But now he's still playing along in politics. We get rid of people that are bad, but they don't go away. They seem to pop up somewhere.
Thank you. Welcome.
For the record, my name is Louis Imbriani. I'm an Eagle River resident. And I wanted to say thank you to Ms. Allard and thank you to Ms. Kennedy, who's not here today. But thank you for representing me and talking to us at community council meetings and really listening to what we have to say. I'd also like to thank Mr. Weddleton and Ms. LaFrance for your vote last Tuesday and your well-spoken words about your thoughts on the emergency order. I think that the reorganization happened, well, that's supposed to happen tonight, or that the vote, the motion is going to happen tonight should have happened when the recall was approved. Not anything against you, Mr. Rivera, but somebody who has a lot more knowledge in the code, a lot more knowledge when it comes to the law, said that that recall application was legit enough to get you on the ballot. I'm not even going to talk about what happened last week because I think it should have happened months ago, just because of the way things progressed and the actions that were approved by the attorney. So I'd hope that everybody who is paying attention really thinks about who they want to appoint as chair. And I don't want any of your guys' jobs. I mean, listening to people come up and talk about their feelings, their thoughts, and what they thought your mindset is incredibly difficult and probably gets kind of boring from time to time. But I really do appreciate everybody paying attention. I mean, I've been watching this whole time, and that was for a reason, watching how everybody reacted, who they were paying attention to, and what points kind of brought the heads up. So, with that being said, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks. I do have a question for you from Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
Actually, I guess it's not a question, it's a comment. But I just want to make clear, after and actually even prior to the recall being approved and going on the ballot, when there were any questions from the staff regarding that on procedure, Mr. Rivera did not have any participation, and that went to me.
Yeah, I understand, and I don't think that he got in the way or anything. I just think that as a procedural standpoint, it would have made good sense to at least have another vote within the body and bring that point up. And I really didn't think about it till now. Otherwise, I probably would have been in your guys' ear about it. So, thank you.
Thank you. And sir, did you speak already earlier?
I did, but I would like to speak on behalf of the community council.
So, sure, I will go ahead and allow it. I think usually, here, I'll actually go to the clerk. She's... Yeah, that's what I think what he's talking about is a resolution. Yeah. All right. Okay, I will go ahead and, I assume that you're reading a resolution, sir?
It's literally reading the resolution, yes.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put your time on. Thanks.
So this is a Campbell Park Community Council resolution that was last Thursday. A resolution that recognizes that any and all political violence from any party or group be denounced emphatically. Whereas the Campbell Park Community Council is a private, non-for-profit, voluntary, self-governing association composed of residents, property owners, business owners, and representatives from the Campbell Park Community Council neighborhood designated by the Anchorage Assembly. And whereas the purpose of the community councils is to provide a direct and continuing means of citizen participation in government and local affairs, whereas the Campbell Park Community Council and all of its residents wherein denounce any and all forms of political violence. Whereas community councils were established in the municipality in order to provide a form of robust debate about issues to the community, neighbors, and individuals who participate in having dialogue germane to the area in which they reside. Whereas in a democracy, the system is predicated on robust conversation with the understanding we may not always agree. Policies are best hammered out through sometimes difficult dialogue and policies settled through the civil process. Whereas we have 245 years of history, the broad majority of which the citizens have figured out how to disagree and maintain civility. Whereas that of late, the conversation has become tense and difficult, at times characterized by violent rhetoric and actions. Whereas that during 2020, while many places saw disagreements break into civil unrest and violence, so far in Alaska we have continued to find ways to disagree without resorting to violence, but instead have used the civil means available to us, such as peaceful protests in public settings, appealing to our representative government to redress our grievance, turning to the courts when those grievances aren't heard. All the means are recognized in our Constitution, and that have evolved over the centuries of the American experiment in self-governance. Whereas that despite all of the positive elements present in our community, there exists in darker places threats of violence that are becoming more present in the light. Whereas that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to each other to build towards a better community. Whereas groups such as Antifa, Proud Boys, the KKK, the Sharps,
Oath Keepers, Black Lives Matter, and the NFAC, and individuals who subscribe to the idea of, pardon my language, all cops are bastards, ACAB, have all contributed to the violent rhetoric that we have seen over the last 4 or 5 years and have no place in a civilized democracy. Whereas the Campbell Park Community Council strongly denounces any and all political violence and violent rhetoric that comes from it. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchorage Assembly denounces any and all political and violent rhetoric that endangers our republic and sovereign. The Campbell Park Community Council resolves to support ongoing and robust civic engagement and denounces violent political rhetoric or action and calls on Anchorage residents to continue maintaining civility in the process. Therefore, be it resolved that the Campbell Park Community Council asks the Anchorage Assembly to pass this as well. Passed and approved by the Campbell Park Community Council with a vote of 8-3, Thursday, April 15th, 2021.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Irene Queetnow, and a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said. I'm very disappointed at your behavior, Mr. Chair. We had a similar situation last year, I think it was at the end of November, beginning of December, where you cut Mrs. Allard's mic off and called her remarks offensive and racist, and then a couple weeks later, somebody from, so to speak, your side of the aisle used that same fact with basically the exact words when you were discussing the vaccine, and all of a sudden it was not offensive just because it came from somebody else. And so the first attack that I just talked about was before the recall was on the ballot, and this recent attack was after you thought you defeated the recall. And so I can't help but think that this has nothing to do really with political thing. It's a personal attack at Mrs. Allard. And for some reason, the fact that you thought that the recall isn't happening, that emboldened you to act like that again. And it was not pretty. And like I said, I was extremely disappointed, and not to mention that it was breaking the rules and very unprofessional. I have nothing against you personally, but it is unacceptable behavior. And especially for somebody who sits in the position as the chair of the assembly. And lastly, I wanted to point something out. Last week you talked about your constituents being behind you. I know of at least one person who voted no on the recall, and since last Wednesday wished they would have voted yes. So if you are losing the support of your constituents at this point, you have to blame yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? And then if anyone else would like to speak, please get in line. Welcome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and
It's like we do
start
this
your
every
sir.
time, right? Imagine just for a moment, I'm sorry, can we start that over? I'll start with my name. Mark Nussbaum for the record. I want us all to imagine just for a moment that a group of bullies has you pinned against a wall. They're teasing, taunting, poking you in the eyes, punching you in the gut. Your anxiety and fear is now growing. Your brain is telling you that you must do something. It's becoming life and death in your head. You start to struggle back. You try and wriggle free without throwing any punches because that's not you, that's not your way. But the bullies continue their hold. You know now that your efforts aren't enough. My fear is that we the people have struggled back. We the people have tried to wriggle free from your continued grasp. And we the people are on the very edge of swinging back at you. That's my fear. My fear is that Anchorage will soon become similar to Seattle or Sacramento, Portland, Phoenix, New York, Minneapolis, Memphis, Louisville, LA. Hey, Chris. Thanks, bud.
Excuse me,
Except
Mr.
I don't
Chair.
think that
Mr.
any
Chair.
Alaskan, let alone Anchorage residents, would be the type to burn and loot
Sir,
businesses.
I'm going to go ahead and pause your time really quick. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thank you. I just would like to let Mr. Nussbaum know that I was writing down his name and a note that once again he's making threatening rhetoric. Thank you.
All right. Please continue, sir.
That's why I've held back with this for so long, because I knew some little person like you would try to pull that maneuver. But I do not fear you, Constant. Oh, my time started again. All right. Except I don't think that any Alaskan, let alone an Anchorage resident, would be the type to burn and loot innocent businesses. I do fear, however, the principle of your people. By that, I mean that your citizens of Anchorage are smart. They're thinking people. They are people of principle. I don't think that businesses will be the focus. I think public records will be the focus. I think that almost each and every one of your home addresses are on the municipal website. I fear that you've bullied the people long enough, and we the people are going to push back in a principle-like matter, not against the city, but against you as individual assembly members. For the record, Mr. Constant, this is not a call to action, and I do not condone violence or destruction of people or property in any manner whatsoever. These are just my fears. I grew up in this city. I take pride in my city. I don't want to see my city turn into any one of these other little shithole cities, crap hole cities. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Carson Brandon Young. So as someone who supported you and then opposed the recall effort and is starting to wonder whether I made the wrong decision, I would like you to explain after deliberation how what you did last week was not a personal attack, because I am baffled that you don't see that.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Amber Glasser, for the record. Really at a loss of words every time. Really want my city back. Want my people in my city to start loving each other again. Almost everyone up here is divisive, and you know it. I'm going to start using your words because I've learned so much in the last 12 months. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. And I wasn't sure which route I was going to go on my testimony. I'm not sure if you listened to the Tom McDonald song, Fake Woke, that I recommended you listen to, but I was going to play it, but I don't think that's appropriate, and I respect this council, and I respect my city. So this is what I'm going to read to you. My boyfriend won't let me visit my friends or family. He has made me stop all contact with them unless it's on the phone. But then the other week, he told me I could go out for a meal with my friends. But when I did, I then got punished for it. I know he'll tell me to do it again, though, so I don't know what action to take. He keeps doing this. He makes me feel like I'm going crazy for thinking he's controlling, but actually I'm being ungrateful. It's because he cares about me. He didn't want me going to the gym anymore, so I don't do that. He also doesn't let me go to work. He told me only to rely on him for income and that he will look after me. I'm not allowed to go out unless it's for necessities. But when I do, I need to share my location with him no matter where I go. If I don't check in with him when I get to the shop, I could get in trouble. I missed my mom so much last week, I snuck off to see her. He caught me and I was told off for it. My grandma's dying in the nursing home and I have been forbidden to see her. I'm not allowed to do anything unless he says so. I wanted to book a holiday and go visit relatives, but he said no. I wanted to go back to school and learn new skills, but I wasn't allowed to do that either. Also, he says I'm allowed to do these things. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I know that the time will come soon. He will change. I know he's only doing this because he loves me. He cares about me. He's doing this all for my own good. Oh, wait, did I say boyfriend? I meant the government. I want you guys to seriously think how abusive this relation is. I am shaking. I shake and I tremble every time I do this. This is not comfortable for me, okay? I love my city. I want my kids to go back to school. I'm waiting for the ASD school board to call me so I can testify and tell them how my kids are suffering. So thank you. thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for hopefully one day giving me my life back.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Roger Branson. I'm a mental health advocate out of Eagle River. I just want to acknowledge what a long, hard year this has been, and the hard work of each of the assembly members that are here present today, as well as Ms. Kennedy. And we've got a challenge ahead of us still. We're in the midst of it. And I see you guys pulling together in the places that it counts, and I appreciate that as an advocate. Our folks they're having a hard time right now. There's a lot of anxiety in the community, lots of stress, lots of unknowns, lots of fear. And just a calm, steady influence is what we need from you guys at this point. And I just want to thank you for continuing to provide that, each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and move on. So next on our agenda, we have item 4A, certification of the April 6th, 2021 regular municipal election. And we have the various documents in front of us. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the clerk, and I apologize I didn't get this to you in advance. On page 3 of the memo, it lists the number of ballots that were rejected initially or challenged for no signature match. And then, of course, many were given the opportunity to cure. But I was wondering if you could speak, that number 850, how does that relate to prior years? Have we seen the number of no signature matches go up, go down, or stay relatively constant?
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Dunbar. The number has gone up this year. Last year, I believe the number was in the 400 to 500 range. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number right in front of me. You know, I think we did our best last year doing signature verification. We redid the training internally last year. This year, we did the training virtually with the Washington State Troopers. I think the renewed training with Washington, you know, put us on alert, and we worked a little bit harder on those signatures, and we found that there were fewer matches.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Rivera? So I think you've answered that question sufficiently. I will say that 3 times during this election, I was reached out to by people who had their ballot rejected for a signature match, and there are people that obviously I know personally, I know it was them and their signature. And it just raised some red flags for me. And I know that you guys work very hard to cure those, if I'm not mistaken. But I am wondering, you know, in future elections, do we expect this same number at 850, or do we think it'll return back to the 400 to 500 range?
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, if you look at the bottom of page 3, I address this no signature match because we too were concerned about that. So there's a couple of things that we have talked about doing for next year. And one of them is when you sign your signature on an official document like the voter declaration on the ballot envelope, it needs to be your official legal signature. Regrettably, sometimes people are using their car's grocery store signature, and I have a car's grocery store signature. And the difference is problematic for us. So I think we're going to do an educational campaign to remind people about that. The second thing that we would like to do is ask voters, think about what's on your driver's license, because some of the reference signatures on file are from the DMV. The state of Alaska has access to that, and those do get uploaded for the reference signatures. So that's one other thing. The third thing that we're considering, and we're a little bit concerned about this, but that would be when we sent the no sig match or the no sig letters, we may ask for a copy of the driver's license with that letter, because that would really solve it for us. However, that's a bigger question, that's a big policy change. We would like to discuss that with the Ethics and Elections Committee going forward, because I think it's an important discussion. You know, in the paragraph, and it goes on to the top of page 4, you know, I do comment that this is an important place to stop fraud. This is part of the way the system works. And I make a comment about an example where we sent a no sig match letter, and a father called us and said, my son did not vote. He is not in Alaska. And he told us that it wasn't his vote. So that's reported elsewhere in no signatures. But there's a push and a pull. There's a balance there. And we would like to find that nice tightrope that we're walking down, where we're rejecting signatures from people who are not the voter, and we are accepting signatures who are the voter.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Oh, thanks. You know, I'd like to invite Mr. Gates just to go through, you know, what certification means. So when we vote on this, should we support the certification of the election? You know, what have we done? What's the impact on recounts and errors and so on? And it's kind of on here on the page 1, but if you can perhaps cover that and even embellish if necessary.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, I will certainly try. As you said, the first page of the AM has a good explanation of what certification of the election means, and I agree with how it's stated there. And basically, the certification of this election means the Assembly determines that based on the Municipal Clerk and the Election Commission's report that it was validly held. That means that the Assembly finds that it was held in compliance with the law and there were no corrupt practices sufficient to change any of the election results. That's 2 elements there that are required for you to not certify maybe a certain race or a certain proposition. It also requires you to say, well, there were not any apparent discrepancies in the returns. The Municipal Clerk in the report and the Election Commission report they didn't find any discrepancies in returns and that the election was validly held in compliance with the code. Certification means that the races are official, the results are official now after the Assembly does certify, but they're still subject to a recount or an election contest if those are filed. We had a change in the code from last January in AO 2020-131S, and I just wanted to note this. An election recount can be filed by a candidate, a defeated candidate, or 10 qualified voters, or an election recount can be determined by the Assembly and ordered by resolution. That needs to happen within, scratch that last part. An application for a recount can be filed by 10 qualified voters or a defeated candidate. It needs to be filed within 7 days of the certification of the election. Before the code change, it was within 7 days of the Election Commission's report of the results. So we changed that for consistency. This is actually much better for the public, for public notice of the certification and so forth. So that 7-day count, if the election is certified tonight, begins tomorrow, and people would have until next Tuesday to file an application for a recount. It also starts the clock for an election contest application to be filed with the municipal clerk. An election contest is a little bit different. It has to be based on grounds that are legal grounds of malconduct, fraud, or corrupt election practices, or that a candidate isn't qualified. And one other ground there. Excuse me. Actually, no, that's all of them. The person wasn't qualified or corrupt practice. An application for an election contest needs to be filed within 9 days of the certification of the election, so that actually gives someone until next Thursday. So the results certified today are subject to those outcomes. After a recount is completed, or if an election contest is decided to be heard by the Assembly, after those are completed and those processes are completed, the results of those processes come back to the Assembly to recertify based on the municipal clerk's report of the recount. At that time, again, those become official results of the recount. So I hope that sufficiently describes the process and what certification means tonight.
Can I continue? Thank you for that. And so it is important to note that we do expect a recount on one, and then looking, we had 1,400 roughly rejected ballots, and I was flipping through the results, and I think there's only one case, a school board, that could, if they all went one way, it could swing the vote, and that's something that there might be a call for a recount anyway. That's not including the limited road service areas, which generally have less than 50 or so votes, and generally there's great harmony in those, and there's one candidate, and they win unanimously. So anyway, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Ms. Jones and the work of your team. I have two, I think, quick questions, and one of them has to do with the annual review of Title 28 and when you expect that to start. It seems I recall it will be after the runoff election, and if you wouldn't mind just speaking to that. And then also, we have had throughout the process different concerns raised about people voting multiple times, and as your report points out, it shows the review process and what gets caught. Would you be able to speak to the section on the bottom of page 4 on duplicate ballots? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, we do an annual review of Title 28 to find issues that popped up during this election, and we will not be starting that until after certification of the runoff election. So I expect we'll take a little break in June, kind of regroup, put all the papers away, and our election calendar has us getting started for the next election in 2022 in June, but this year we'll put that off until July, and then we'll probably start our initial review of Title 28. In the past, it's been a small group of people. We're working pretty hard on code language, trying to make sure that we're not missing anything. I think there are a couple issues that we already know that we need to look at, and I'm kind of drawing a blank right now, but if I think of them, I'll let you know. So Title 28 review will probably start in June, and then we'll report. We probably won't start reporting to the Ethics and Elections Committee until August. And then what we'll do is we'll bring chunks of that review and ideas to the Ethics and Elections Committee meeting. And then, like I mentioned earlier, a policy decision. Like when we have a policy decision, we'll talk to the committee about it. And we want you to tell us what you think we should do on that policy decision. So that's probably more than enough about Title 28. Page 4, duplicate votes. Okay, so we have some challenged ballots here. It looks like there's 18 voters that voted twice. As you can see, they are all a little bit different. One voter voted twice at a vote center. One voter voted at a vote center and returned a ballot in a drop box. 12 voters returned a ballot by mail or drop box and then voted at a vote center. So for those voters, I think we're moderately concerned about that. I think one of the issues that we look at when people vote twice, and we'll provide this information to the municipal attorney and the municipal prosecutor, is what is the age of the voter. Oftentimes we do have voters who are elderly. They get their by mail ballot and they vote that ballot and then they still go to the vote center. And I think that that's a mitigating stance that the prosecutor would take into consideration. However, if there isn't a mitigating circumstance, the voter isn't disabled or elderly, I think that the prosecutor will probably be concerned about those ones. For the next one, we had 3 voters who received a signature no match letter. So they got a no match letter, they had some action that they needed to take with respect to that, and they probably just said, forget it, I'm going to a vote center and showing my ID and voting. And so I think that is a slightly different circumstance. And we will let the municipal attorney and the prosecutor know that. And then similarly, for the last voter in that category, the ballot envelope was received and not signed, and then the voter voted again at a vote center and signed it. So, that's another one that I think is explainable. A voter said, I'm not going to put my signature on the outside of the envelope. We sent him a signature, no sig letter that said there is no signature, we can't count. They said, well, then I'm going to go to the vote center and I'll show my ID and vote. So I think those ones are different circumstances. In the next 2 categories, so this is ballot voted by someone other than the voter. We had 1 ballot envelope that was voted and signed by the voter's spouse. The spouse, there were a variety of circumstances that the spouse told us that the spouse voted the spouse's ballot. So we will turn that information over to the prosecutor. The second one, again, we don't know who voted this ballot, but it wasn't a signature match. So we sent the opportunity to cure letter that said no sig match, and the voter's father called us and said, he didn't vote. He's not in Alaska. So we're very concerned about that one, but by not matching the signature, we caught that potential fraud, and that one will go to the prosecutor. So I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is going to be for Ms. Jones as well. I guess what I'm hearing is that there's still an opportunity for any concerns or discrepancies that voters became aware of, that those can still be sent in to request investigating. So that's assuring. But there are several things I know that I'm going to bring forward in the Ethics and Elections Committee meeting. So, I'll be doing that, obviously, when we have that committee meeting. But one of my questions is in regard to some of the comments that talked about how people did not get the correct ballot to vote. Can you touch a little bit about how something like that would actually even be investigated? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, Ms. Kennedy. So I'm going to touch on both comments that you made. First, you said you were glad that there were still opportunities for concerns or discrepancies. I want to make sure that you understand that those are limited opportunities to raise concerns or discrepancies. Number one, someone can file an election contest. Number two, someone can file for a recount. But those are, obviously legal proceedings that are fairly complex. So I want to make sure that you understand that people still having the opportunities for concerns or discrepancies is might not be 100% accurate. What I'm saying and what I said earlier was call me if you believe, or our elections hotline, our elections email, if someone believes that they did not get the correct ballot, call me. We need to figure out why that was. It's a post-mortem. It is not going to change this report unless I find something super serious that went wrong. But the likelihood of that happening is fairly small, and I'll tell you why, Ms. Kennedy. It is 2 weeks after the election. I've let people know to call me if they didn't get a correct ballot for District 4. I have not gotten any calls, 0 calls, as of when I left the election center at about 3 o'clock. Now, they could have gone to the call center and maybe haven't been filtered through to us, but again, we answer calls on a 24-hour, we have a requirement to answer them, and I have not got any calls or emails about that. So that is one issue. So if the question is...
Ms. Jones, can I interrupt you,
yes.
Mr. Chair? Thank you, Ms. Jones. Actually, that's exactly what I want to hear, that clarification. But what you're telling me is that people still need to call. So I guess what I'm saying is, okay, and that's perfect. So thank you on that one. So
now the second question, what am I going to investigate? That is easy.
The question was how you investigate whether or not a person actually did receive the correct ballot.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to investigate is the State of Alaska Division of Elections has given the clerk's office access to VREMS, the Voter Registration Election Management System. We have only only access. We don't have any access to be able to update the state voter registration database. So what we'll do is, number one, go look in VREMS. What does VREMS have to say about this voter? This is the voter's information. We'll provide as much of it as possible to the voter. We'll show the voter's status, the voter's address, if the voter changed the voter's address, if the state of Alaska changed the voter's address. All of that information is in the database. So it shows when we first registered, it shows our voter history. So we'll pull that information. Then the next thing that we'll do is we'll take a look at our information. And our information, we've taken it from the state. We've made a decision based on the GIS map that I mentioned earlier, what ballot style to assign this voter. And so I'm going to look to see if our data matches up with that data in the State of Alaska voter registration database. If there's a mismatch, if there's either a match, an error in the state's database, or an error in our application of our GIS address to that, we'll take action about that. We may contact the state, ask the state what happened. We may need to have the voter contact the state. Or if it was an error on our GIS database, we may take a look at the mapping. Was there an error in that? and we would certainly take action to fix it. And we would report back to the assembly about this. If there was a mistake, we all need to know about that.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. Barbara, I'm going to ask you, when people come in and vote, let me take these out. When people come in and vote in person, we check their ID against their signatures. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Ms. Allard, I didn't hear the last part of, we check ID and...
When individuals come in and vote in person, we check their IDs right there to make sure their signature, their voter, their driver's license, or whatever ID they have matches on spot, right?
Ms. Allard, we check ID. We ask the voter to provide ID. We do not check to make sure that the signature matches.
So technically, if we only had in voting in person, we could bypass all this and it would be fixed. We wouldn't have to verify signatures, right?
Well, I have no idea. I mean, if you want to change the voting system from mailing ballots and people mailing back, no absentee voting, no special needs voting, no electronic voting, no overseas military voting, you could do that.
That wasn't my question.
Okay.
So my question is, if we only had in-person voting, like the state, we could do absentee ballots. It would alleviate the signature and almost 850 people that we couldn't verify signatures, right?
Ms. Allard, that is a policy decision of the Assembly, and yes, you can pursue that.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. Two questions, Ms. Jones. So maybe one question and a comment. The list, we had someone raise the question about the list and why we use the state's list. Is there a code requirement or a state law requirement that puts that in effect?
Mr. Constant, I don't entirely know the answer to that, but I will tell you that the state of Alaska is different than most other jurisdictions, for example, in the lower 48, where the county clerk, which the consolidated city and borough of Anchorage is similar to a county clerk, where the county clerk runs elections, and the county clerk has access to that database that is usually owned by the Secretary of State in most other jurisdictions. The problem in Alaska is because of our unincorporated boroughs and because of the villages and other small jurisdictions, there wouldn't be a clerk to do that in many parts of Alaska. And for that reason, when Alaska was, when we became a state, a decision was made to provide this power to the state division of elections rather than the counties. So I'm sorry that is only a partial answer to your question, but that's all I know.
Thank you. I look forward to figuring out the grounds of that question in the future. And secondly, this double ballot question, to me, a number of those concerns that were raised were related to people not feeling like their vote might have been tallied, and so they wanted to make sure they got their ballot cast. And so I understand that the Assembly has been working to get a ballot tracking system in place, and I am really hopeful that this body adopts a position that by the next regular election that we have implemented a ballot tracking system so that the people have an opportunity to verify that their ballot was scanned across the machine and how the fidelity of the process works. And so I think that that's a simple function that should be implemented by next year, and we'll be having a robust talk about that soon. And separate, I don't want to speak again, I don't think I need to, but I just want to thank you personally and professionally. I want to thank your team who has done an incredible amount of work despite high challenges that were placed in front of you by circumstance or by other means, and you have risen to the challenge, and we have before us an election that we can certify as conducted in a fair and free and open way. One note, Mr. Dunbar made a comment that many people had the opportunity to cure their ballots. Every person had the opportunity to cure their ballots. The letters went out to everybody. And so some availed themselves of that opportunity. And I had to harangue several friends who received one of those letters telling them, you need to go in. And they came in within an hour of the closing on Friday. And so we have work ahead of us. There's always a way to make it better. But I thank you for your hard work in the conduct of this election.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
That item is approved 10-0. Next, we have item 4B1, resolution number AR 2021-130. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and congratulating election workers for managing and navigating the challenges and successfully completing the April 6th, 2021 regular municipal election. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any opposition? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Who's reading, who's presenting?
I don't think we asked anyone to do that. We're short-staffed today.
Do you want to read it, Mr. Chair?
Sure, I'm happy to read it. AR number 2021-130, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and congratulating election workers for managing and navigating the challenges and successfully completing the April 6th, 2021 regular municipal election. Whereas, after a large percentage of election workers declined to work last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many returning election workers and several new workers stepped up and answered the call to work in the April 6th, 2021 regular municipal election during the continuing pandemic. And whereas elections workers faced a number of challenges in 2021, including the ongoing pandemic, needing to brush up on skills after 1 year off, as well as responding to the increased public interest in elections and answering questions for the public about the tasks and roles that they play in municipal elections. And whereas, even so, the success of the April 6th, 2021 regular municipal election can be attributed to the election workers who are our friends, neighbors, and relatives, and their tireless work preparing for the election and the long days, especially on election day, processing voters, and continuing to finish all of the tasks necessary to request certification and complete the election process. And whereas the 2021 election workers include Elaine, Jane, Patty, Claire, Jenna, Marianne, Betsy, Joan, Gail, Ann, Eric, Robin, Dixie, Helen, Jane, Rebecca, Judith, Jim, Morris, Margaret, Donna, Gary, Doris, Terry, Luann, Suzanne, Dean, Barbara, Lo, Judy, Claudette, James, Karen, Bonnie, Katie, Terry, Jerry, Athena, Jane, Peggy, Maury, Jean, Larry, Diane, Jean, Sherry, and Brandy, as well as the election core team, Amy, Liz, and Erica. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly recognizes that now is the time for thanking MOA election workers for their commitment in challenging times, and we express admiration for these workers that inspire trust in our democracy. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 20th day of April, 2021.
Mr. Chair.
I see Mr. Weddleton in the queue. I can put you in after. Mr. Weddleton?
Just briefly, we've got on this fourth whereas the list of workers here, and I question this list because I've never seen that many names and not have at least 2 Johns. Could you check?
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to ask that we take 5 minutes before we move on to the next item.
Sure. I will see if there's any other discussion on this topic, and then happy to take 5. Okay, seeing no other discussion, thank you so much to the elections team. We're going to go ahead and take 5 minutes before we move on.
Legal opinion from Mr. Gates on the question of whether or not the municipality has the authority to author its own voter roll. The answer is state law prohibits municipalities from using their own lists under Alaska Statute 29.26.050 Part B. We are required to use the state's list, Alaska Statute 15.07.140.
Thank you. All right, so moving on. So for this next section of our agenda, the Vice Chair and I have agreed that we're going to be swapping roles, so he will take over the gavel, and I will be sitting in his chair.
The seat's low. I don't know what's going on. Broken. So, well, welcome everybody. We will be going through and having assembly member comments, which you've seen before. Generally, they're fairly mundane. We just talk about various things going on. Last weekend, they weren't so much, and it led to a fairly dramatic event that many of you responded to, and I think appropriately is worth comment. I hope that members will be addressing a number of issues and likely, what happened last week. I think from the audience, it'd be appreciated if we don't hoot and holler and clap, just kind of quietly be respectfully and listen to each assembly member, give them their time. And for assembly members, I know we've done well many times, often, usually. I've learned over the years that it's best to always focus on the issue and not on the person. What's the points on the issues? What are the facts of concern? Not view on the person. Should we not be able to do that, and there's an issue with a person, be respectful. And if you can't find a way to respect your colleagues, respect the voters that put them in office, and just look through that person and say, they were elected to represent a viewpoint and honor those voters. So working through the comments, I'd like to start with Ms. Kennedy, who's on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Vice Chair, Acting Chair. Thank you. And I want to thank my colleagues who agreed that we needed some time to digest and analyze the event of last week and to figure out how we get past it. I first want to say it is not my intent to make things worse, but I do recognize that there is some risk here. So mostly I'm glad we're having this open and transparent discussion on the event. As I requested that last Friday, I realize it's a bit of a delicate conversation, so I wish we could have had it more informally, but it is what it is, and the comment period of this meeting will have to do. The one thing I do not want to do is to repeat an act similar to what I witnessed against Ms. Allard last week with my comments tonight toward Mr. Rivera. 2 wrongs do not make a right, so hopefully I've chosen my words carefully. I've actually gone over my comments several times today to try to remove any words that I think might be taken wrong. So please don't hear what I am not saying. I've mentioned to this body before that I have little patience for tit-for-tat type of rhetoric or for episodes of constant political revenge. And while I struggled with and prayed over what I wanted to say, it was my goal not to trigger the sensibilities of others, again, not wanting to make anything worse. But I will say, though, that typically when a wound is festering, there is some discomfort in disturbing it, enough to clean it out, but that then makes room for the real healing to begin, and it's that healing that is also my goal. During Wednesday night's period of closing comments, I witnessed a behavioral display by an elected official in a position of leadership over a body of elected officials, the likes of which I can honestly say I've never witnessed before in all my 11 years of public service. That's just the truth. But I will say the only thing I've ever actually seen come close was when I was in Juneau as a school board member visiting with various legislators, and I witnessed a state representative in the hallway of the Capitol building with clenched fists, literally jumping up and down and angrily shouting at the Anchorage School District Superintendent. Well, that was pretty shocking. So in describing the events that I witnessed last week, I just want to say what I observed and I experienced and how I interpreted and perceived it. So to some degree and from some angle, we all witnessed what transpired. But like a car wreck, as observers, we will each end up having a different perspective on what happened, and essentially we each had to process even why it happened. I understand that Mr. Rivera had his sensitivities tweaked by a question asked by Ms. Allard from the night before. But taking that question and instead of having a debate on the merits of the question, deciding to turn it into a series of assumptions and exaggerations on Ms. Allard's intent or implications of the topic, of which he actually admitted in his own comments that he could not actually specifically speak to her attention, was simply inappropriate. So no matter how you want to characterize it, I believe it was an unacceptable response and would have been to any member of the body or to the public for that matter. The fact that the comments came while seated as the chair of the assembly, which to me, I believe, presented an abuse of authority. It was out of line, so beyond proper protocol, and just the tenure of the remarks aimed at Ms. Allard, to me, to witness personally, was rather intolerable. So I'm still shaken every time I'm forced to think about it. But you know, the interesting thing is that night I had just finished making my comments regarding how opinions are personal. Everyone has their own and is actually entitled to such. But we as a body listened to hundreds of them without a so-called public critique of anyone's opinion, regardless of how we feel about their comments or their beliefs or their stance. I said we may agree or disagree. We may accept or reject the sentiments. But everyone is entitled to express their opinion, and we never allow a member to actually debate the public during testimony, and we don't allow individuals to attack each other. So to ignore our own advice, our own protocols, our own rules of engagement, if you will, in this situation is unacceptable to me. For my part in this incident, when the chair started in with his comments, I was truly shocked and simply stunned. So genuinely stunned that if we weren't covered by masks, my expression would have pretty much told my whole story right then and there. But I felt threatened myself, so I cannot imagine how Ms. Allard felt. I suspect other members experienced something very similar. Now, I'm not excusing Ms. Allard's outburst in response to the attack, but we all know there's a human response, and that is either a fight or flight response when someone is threatened or attacked. And obviously, Ms. Allard's first response was to fight back with whatever emotions over the incident allowed her to muster at the time. It was not a proper response, but again, if any of us were treated that same way, it's hard to say how any of us would have actually taken it. I was considering a call of a point of order, but Ms. Allard did so first, but her call was essentially ignored. It was not ruled on, but the chair simply said, "I'm going to continue," forgetting that his role as chair was to orchestrate the processes of the meeting, but instead he insisted on accomplishing his goal of levying the criticisms and insults. Again, I was just stunned. To me, it looked like that goal of the chair's comments that took such a surprising turn was not to argue the merits of the question, but was to criticize, demean, and embarrass her as much as possible. That's how I heard it. That's how I interpret it, and that's how I felt. And then to make sure Ms. Allard could not object further, he simply turned off her mic. I didn't call point of order at that point, which I immensely regret, because I thought if Ms. Allard isn't permitted to do so in her own defense, what chance do I have of being recognized for the same purpose? How do you appeal to the authority to ask for a redress of a wrong when the very same authority is causing the wrong to begin with. Now, I know there will be comments later that attempt to justify the act, but like the car wreck I mentioned earlier, this is what I observed. And I do recognize my own response was not appropriate either. I will say that my victims, bullies, and bystanders awareness did not kick in very well, so I failed at the appropriate bystander role. And I regret not being better prepared for saying something at that moment. So my apologies to the body for that lack of knowledge of the deeper procedural strategies of Robert's rules, and especially my apologies to Ms. Allard. Be assured it won't happen again. So I'm not going to support or defend any of the contextual comments from either member that apparently started all of this, because I believe there's a great deal of misunderstanding and misinformation made on both sides. But I want all members to know how embarrassing, how threatening, how disruptive, how unproductive, unprofessional, and immature this all felt to me. I do not believe and I do not accept that it is in any way a chair's duty to lash out against a member under the guise of answering to the intent of a question or an opinion on a matter. What all of us needs to recognize, and some of us have actually learned from experience over the years, is that there are always people who might offend you, who might try to push your buttons, so to speak. We know all about that. And we are never compelled to respond, especially in a vengeful or spiteful way. No one can force you to take the bait. No one can actually make you mad. Those are choices that each one of us makes as an individual. But here's what disturbs me the most in all of this now, and this is why I wanted to have this conversation. And that is that the chair has publicly stated that he would do the same thing again. That, to me, is very threatening. So I'm asking, who's next? Whose comments that upset the sensibilities of the current chair will give him an excuse to critique others, and another one of us becomes the target? Well, I'm telling you now, I can't work under that threat. The public and probably even staff can't work with us under that threat, and none of us should have to. I suspect everyone knows by now there's been bad blood between the two most political opposites on the Assembly for months now, so I'm pretty sure I'm not saying anything that people aren't already aware of. We've seen it played out in a couple of other incidents, and I'm not going to go there. But fearing that this feud would escalate, I asked Mr. Rivera weeks ago to talk to Ms. Allard face-to-face so they could air out their grievances with each other and figure out how to come to some sort of truce and agreement. Unfortunately, I don't believe that ever happened, and now we find ourselves in this place. You know, I've seen other members do their venting on Facebook pages, and though I don't believe for a second that that's a good idea, at least it's not using it at will from the higher seat of authority that exists within the Anchorage Assembly to publicly attack or chastise or censor or censure or whatever you want to try to justify it as against another member. Believe me, there is no other substitute for fixing disagreements between two parties than a conversation. Even Scripture tells us to go to our brother when we have a complaint and talk it out, because tossing it out into the realm of public opinion and scrutiny is actually considered gossip. So how do we fix this? You know, I really wasn't kidding when I said a few months ago during a meeting that we could all benefit from an anger management class. Believe me, just because someone keeps a smile on their face or maintains a calm voice and demeanor doesn't mean there aren't anger issues there. In terms of dealing with our disagreements, a disagreement only becomes disagreeable if we refuse to understand each other better, and that takes better conversations directly with each other and making fewer assumptions before we jump to conclusions and allow our emotions to overwhelm better judgment. But I absolutely want to make sure that an incident like this never happens again, that no member of this body or any member of the public, for that matter, has to be subjected to something like this personally again, or that any one of us or the public has to be a witness to something like this again. So at this time, as much as I appreciate Mr. Rivera's organizational skill set, he's good at that, I believe other unfavorable factors have now surfaced, And I believe we're in a time of needing to regroup, allow some cooling down time, some healing time within this body that will also benefit the public as a whole, and to build up some trust within this body. The current leadership has been shrouded by drama and controversy over the past several years, and I'm sorry that that's the case, but I think we could all use a break from it for a while. So at this moment, I have serious doubts that all members can be treated fairly and without personal bias. I have doubts that going forward in the same condition is actually in the best interest of all members. So I don't mean for that to sound like a disparaging remark to the current chair, but I think it is a realistic assessment. So again, please don't hear what I'm not saying, but take note of the serious situation we are in and how the Assembly as a whole must overcome the public perception of our dysfunction. So I will be supporting the motion to reorganize and the election of a new chair, at least for the time being, while we're all trying to recover and regain a level of more appropriate composure and decorum. And I will absolutely commit to all of you to do my best to help create a different environment where each member is treated respectfully and fairly, and especially where the public is concerned. So enough said, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for indulging me the extensive time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. I see Ms. Zolotel in the queue. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I appreciate Ms. Kennedy framing her comments as to what she's observed. I think that's a great frame for this conversation. And what I've observed is it's been a heck of a year. I appreciated the member from the public who made that acknowledgement that this past year has been really rough on everyone. What I've also observed is that a year ago, in reflecting back, we entered the COVID-19 crisis and emergency as a united body, and that this community has always held a wide diversity of viewpoints, but the tenor of expressing those viewpoints has been significantly degraded in the last 9 months. And here I'd like to share an observation actually from a long-term member of the public who messaged me after watching our meetings, and the words speak for themselves. Sitting at home, this person's been involved for 40 years, by the way, sitting at home watching the Assembly meeting broadcasts, wondering where the guy believes he gets the rights to disrupt meetings. Has everyone gone totally nuts? The early public participation was added to give a broader diversity of individuals the opportunity to speak and be heard. The caustic disruption of your meetings is clearly having an impact on the Assembly getting the public works done. Many folks avoid the meetings just because the demeanor of the meetings has degraded to the point they have. It's worse than any time in the 40 years I've been doing this. And so many folks are now making the convenient choice to avoid going to meetings and the constant confrontations and the imposing disruptive behavior. I think that's telling. I think the 40-year perspective is really telling. When I came on this body 2 years ago, Mr. Dyson and I were getting on the elevator and he said, you know, we're going to vote a lot the same way and it's going to surprise you because we're getting there from different directions, but we're going to work together. And I really appreciated that. And I've been really thinking about why it doesn't feel like it did a year ago. And partly some of that is, like many others, I'm tired and I am stressed out due to COVID. But frankly, it was the change of the membership on this body. It significantly altered this body. So what I've observed is that where previously a disagreement could be had without personal attacks, often different views would lead to new pathways forward, pushing people to consider other ways to find the best path forward. But personal attacks and a lack of respect for what feels like the values of this office and the community by one member have permeated the business of this body. I think we have to acknowledge what has happened over this last year, just as Ms. Kennedy wanted to acknowledge what happened the other night. And that's threats have been received, and there have been repeated personal attacks by multiple members, by the member from Chugiak Eagle River. They have been done in a manner that doesn't make work on this body feel collegial or conducive to trying to find creative solutions to the problems the municipality is facing. The last phone call I had with this member, I was cussed out. That's what I observed. I welcomed this member to the body when she was elected and wanted to work with her. And frankly, I tried and tried again, and then it just didn't happen. I still want to. I hold this job and this position in the deepest reverence. I work my tail off. All members on this body work their tails off. So to have this change is just so disheartening. It makes this work so hard in a way that it doesn't have to be, in a way that the history of this body proves it doesn't have to be like this. Dissent can happen civilly. So I also want to respond to the comments received asking for us to jump to this member's defense from last Tuesday night. Frankly, no one's jumping to our defense when we're getting attacked or there's a sleight of hand. So I think members are able to speak up for themselves and use Robert's rules accordingly, and often do. Hear point of orders all the time. The last thing I guess I want to address is, well, 2 more points, and I thank you for the time, that the folks who come here to testify, I truly appreciate the viewpoints. It pushes me to think outside of where I've probably started from. But also remember that there are, in at least Midtown, there are 42,000 voters, and we hear from them. Mr. Rivera and I attend 9 community councils a month, plus we hold intermittent constituent meetings, and our email is, I always like to say, hot. It just rolls. So we are listening to a wide variety of viewpoints. This is not just the viewpoints that make it to the podium here to speak or even on the telephone. Finally, I'd like to address the position of the chair. The chair of the assembly, and I've only had the pleasure to serve under 2 or with 2, is one that takes extreme organization and one that simply seems overwhelming. It is a lot of work, and I have to say Mr. Rivera has done it very, very well and pushed this body to be better by setting priorities and goals, wading us through significant public participation with the federal funding through COVID, and frankly has a very even keel. I do not think that we should punish or take away from the work someone has done because they call out when they have heard uncivil discourse. That is a part of this position. And uncivil discourse includes attacks and comments that are meant to degrade or be unflattering to a group of people or individuals. So I hope Mr. Rivera retains the chairmanship of this body. I think he has had a steady hand. We are going to go through another major transition in the next, actually 2 major transitions likely in the next 60 days, those being a mayoral runoff and the COVID-19 transition, hopefully back towards normalized operations as we've been discussing. So I want us to keep the steady course, and I would urge that you really consider not just the events of one day, but take a look back at, your time on this body and how this moment in time reflects your experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Altel. I've got Mr. Constant in the queue next. My intent was just to go down in order, but I'm happy to go to Mr. Constant if you want, or
Okay.
do you want to go in order? I would have started with
I'll wait.
Mr. President. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Okay, I won't wait.
Oh, I thought you said lead.
No, I said I would wait. It doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Mr. Presverdia, would you like to speak? Any comments?
Well, first, let me just say that this is a bit odd because I would assume that these comments in some way are related to the action before us, which is the vote to reorganize. But also just it's odd to have this sort of moment of reflection on one particular event. So I'll try to be brief. I would like to sort of separate it into two pieces. There's a process question in front of me that in terms of what happened the other night and what was proper process. And I think it's worth a review. I think it's worth looking at to see, what was done and how it was done, whether that should be called out or changed, or whether there was wrongdoing in terms of the process. So that's worthwhile to me to hear from someone about that. The second is the conversation about the behavior and what was said. And I just don't really feel like that this is the forum to really go into depth on that. I think that I feel like that I completely respect the comments that were made on both sides. I've received lots of comments through email on it. I think that there is, I would agree that with Ms. Zolotel that from the member from Eagle River, there is a history of behavior and comments that I've experienced in my role on this assembly that have been disturbing and unprofessional and concerning to me. But I think that I have to give that person the right to do the things that they believe are right. And so, but if you ask my opinion, I certainly share some of the opinion that I've had a great deal of concern there. In terms of the other night, I think from my perspective, it was more of a process problem. I think that the chair has every right to share his concern and his opinion, and the member from Eagle River should have her ability to share her concern and her ideas in response to that. So that's really where I stand on it. In terms of the reorganization, I also agree that Felix has done a good job and that we are in a good place. I feel like that I would like to consider a reorganization after the mayoral election is finished. I think that's proper. I think that it's normal for us to have a thoughtful conversation about that and to consider new leadership. But I would prefer that not happen tonight. I'd prefer that happens after the mayoral election, so we have a sense of who's coming in as mayor, and we can make good decisions about who's in a leadership role. So that's sort of where I'm at. But I certainly haven't made my decision. I'm anxious to hear what others think, and then would be ready to make a decision following the comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Presverdia. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. So, to the rules. Other than the code and the charter, which are above all of our other rules, we have Robert's Rules of Order, the 12th edition. So I'm going to go through some of the rules. Chapter 61, Part 9. In the case of disorder, the presiding officer should remain calm. In the case of what happened the other night, he in fact did. And in fact, over the past year, a virtual endless assault of personal attacks, he did. He could have handled that moment better had he passed the gavel on as you would do in a normal debate. But we weren't in debate. It was an unusual moment. And so the rules fit, but they're obtuse. The rules definitely say that the chair shouldn't attempt to drown out someone who's making a point of order. And so the one thing Mr. Rivera could do better in the next case would be to find a way to calm the situation more effectively. But that doesn't strike against the fact that the kind of behavior of outrage over the last year has proven Mr. Rivera is very calm and respectful through the process. The rules also say, during debate, remarks by the presiding officer to the assembly that no member should be permitted to disturb the assembly. That's chapter 43, part 28. Chapter 43, part 21. It actually says that a member should refrain from attacking a member's motives when a question is pending. However, a member can condemn the nature or likely consequence of the proposed measure in strong terms. But he must avoid personalities and under no circumstances attack or question the motives of another member. Focus on the measure, not the member, is the subject of the debate. The fact is, the chair's speech at that time was exactly on point to rule number 43, part 21. I would also note for the record that the mic was cut off after the point of order was responded to by the chair, not before, so the member did have an opportunity. So chapter 23, part 1, point of order. It doesn't require a second when a member raises a point of order that they believe the rules are being violated. They should call on the chair for a ruling. The member from Eagle River did that. The challenge, of course, was that the point of order was not specific, and in that moment, the chair overruled the member. What's a member to do? They need to appeal the ruling of the chair if they feel aggrieved and the grievance continues. Now, that motion must be made and seconded. It's a debatable motion most of the time, but it's not debatable when a claim of indecorum or transgressions of the rules of speaking are on the table. The only one allowed to speak on the subject is the chair, who may describe the reasons he made the ruling. So the member from Eagle River, the other member from Eagle River who spoke earlier, stated, how do you appeal when the person who was wronged has been shut down? And stated that if anyone had been treated this way, they would likely act the same. I can personally attest to, on this record, from that corner of this dais, I have been called a racist directly by the member from Eagle River. And I did not stand up and shout. I did not stand up and demand. I didn't do any of that. Instead, I just let it go, because sometimes that's what you have to do. The most germane rule in the question that we have before us is 24, part 2, chapter 24, part 2. It's very clear. It says, members have no right to criticize a ruling of the chair unless they appeal from his decision. So to all the members going forward, the answer to this problem is, if you do not agree with the treatment you're receiving by any member of this body, if you don't hear from the chair the answer that you want, then you have to put the question into the hands of the body, because the body is the one who sets the rule in the end. Those are my comments on this matter. It's challenging. I have to associate myself with the remarks of the members who say things definitely have changed on this body, and I can't say for the better, because we've lost the ability to talk among all of us, and we need all of us to do this work. And so I am regretful of the moment that came to pass, but I cannot find in that moment anything other than an opportunity to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Dunbar, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have extensive comments tonight. I'll just say I think Mr. Constant laid out Robert's rules well. I'd also like to identify myself with Mr. Perez-Radia's comments about process. And I was thinking about my first year on the Assembly, when Ms. Gray Jackson was the chair, now Senator Gray Jackson, and later when Mr. Trainey was the chair, and how they would have handled these kinds of situations. And I think it is a little bit difficult to know, because it just wasn't like this for years, and you and I were elected at the same time. Or had I been the chair, the couple times that I was, what I would have done. I think it's difficult to say. I think particularly because it was during closing member comments, and the chair speaks last, and I think that created a sense of an inability to respond. But I believe, and perhaps Mr. Rivera could speak to this if he makes comments, that had the member from Eagle River waited until the end of Mr. Rivera's comments, or had she made the point of order and then appealed it and lost, I would have liked to, I believe that Mr. Rivera would have given her a chance to speak again, because it was just a question of the timing that she happened to speak before of the assembly member comments. And there is some flexibility in the rules, there is flexibility in decorum, and often chairs do give members the opportunity to speak more than once during debate, for example. And I think that's how it probably best could have been handled. But other than that, I appreciate this conversation, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dundar. Mr. Rivera?
Thanks. So just a few things. Yeah, I really appreciate some of the comments and discussion from the folks who spoke before me, including the comments from the member from Eagle River. So a couple of things just in response to some of the comments. I do like the idea of during assembly member comments of possibly having the chair hand over the gavel if they are going to be making extensive comments. I think that probably procedurally makes more sense. I think it makes it appear more fair to other members. And then I also think it may make sense for perhaps the chair, rather than to speak last, to either speak first or speak, since the chair is in the middle of the dais, to speak in that order that they are positioned in the dais. So I appreciate those comments. You know, the only short thing that I'd like to add is just really a thank you to everyone who has reached out, whether in support of my words or upset by my words. I've appreciated most of the dialogue, and I agree with the general sentiment from most that we have work to get done on behalf of all our constituents, and we should focus on that work in an orderly and respectful manner. How we do our work and speak on the matters before us, I truly believe, is a reflection of this body. In response to a couple of, I think during audience participation, there were a couple of folks who wanted me to address things, so happy to do so. So first, on the cutting off of the mic, I think Mr. Constant addressed this fairly well, but just sort of going through the rote motions. A point of order was raised in my interpretation, and I think in the interpretation of most members of this body. That point of order was sort of the essence of say what you're going to say, in which case my response to that point of order was, that's what I'm doing. I did not hear a rejection to my ruling or an attempt to override my ruling, in which case the other members are correct. That would have gone to the body to deal with. So when any member sort of after a ruling is made does not abide by that ruling and they continue to be out of order, then I think, in my opinion, and perhaps others have different opinions, but I think it is fair for the chair, in order to continue the business that we have and in order to maintain order, to cut off the mic of an individual. Then next is sort of the characterization of a personal attack. Again, I think some others have addressed this fairly well, but my statements attacked an idea, which I think some of you guys may remember when I say at the beginning of the meeting. I don't say it very often, but every now and then I talk about, the need to talk about ideas versus personalities. And then I did attack behavior, which is something that other members have, I think, very eloquently brought up some of the behavior issues that we've seen over the last year. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I won't follow your rule. I'm going to skip me and move over to Ms. LaFrance. So, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the points that have been raised by all the other members so far. Thank you for this conversation. And each member of the Assembly is entitled to free speech, but each of us needs to follow the rules of order and wait our turn to speak, as difficult as that may be sometimes. There's always been spirited debate in these chambers, and I believe very strongly that no matter what is said, we have to remain calm and composed and follow Robert's rules. It's been a difficult and tumultuous year. It's, as Ms. Zelatil said, it's been exhausting. I don't want to reconstruct last week's Assembly comments here, though I think as a body, it may be productive for us to spend some time in another setting reviewing procedures to make sure that we all have the same understanding of the issues concerning free speech, decorum, and protocols. And I appreciate Mr. Perez-Verdia's point about separating those different issues. I agree with keeping our Assembly leadership and taking up reorganization after the runoff election is complete. In the meantime, we have work to do. We need to focus on that. It's a lot of work, and we're more effective when we work together, and I'm hoping that we will pick up and continue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually not going to be speaking directly about what happened last week. I'm going to talk a little bit about a philosophy that was passed on to me when I became a member of the Alaska State Legislature. As we were taking the ferry down to Juneau in 2009, Representative Max Gruenberg and I were having a conversation, and he told me, gave me some good advice. And he said his number one rule when dealing with other legislators is never burn the bridge. In other words, you have to be able to work with these individuals for a couple of years. You got a 2-year term at least. And so, you know, sometimes there's differences of opinion. There's going to be differences of opinion. People are going to disagree. You just have to figure out a way to do it in a way that's not disagreeable. And in the past, since when I was in the legislature, I followed that philosophy, and it worked really well for me. And as a matter of fact, my legislative colleagues in the legislative skits one year, compared me to Mr. Rogers. Now, some people thought I should have been embarrassed about that, but heck, I kind of thought Mr. Rogers was a nice guy. And even though that program started many years after I was probably too old to watch it. So I actually saw the movie, so that's about all I know about Mr. Rogers. But, you know, working on as an elected official on a body like this or a similar one, you have to use the golden rule. Treat your colleagues like you would like to be treated yourself. And if you do that, you're going to have a good working relationship with them. And when you have disagreements, they'll understand that you just disagree on the issue. It's not a personality problem going forward. And so you may disagree with them today, but you can work on an ordinance or an amendment tomorrow. And that's what my philosophy has become over the last dozen or so years that I've been a member of elected body, and that's the philosophy that I'm going to continue to go forward with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Roger. Peterson. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. I don't have any comments.
All right, thank you. Back to the chair.
Where's our clerk? All right, we're going to go ahead and take a short break until we get our clerk back, which we need for the next part of our meeting. I did want to clarify one thing. So the next part of our meeting is Assembly reorganization. This motion to reorganize is something that is required by code, so it's something that we always do during this meeting. I think there might have been characterization that this is something that we normally do. Yeah, we now have item 4C, Assembly reorganization, and the clerk will be handling that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any nominations for chair?
Do we need a motion to reorganize?
Did you know what? We do need a motion to Mr.
I would-
Reorganize. Thank you very much, Mr. Constant.
Move to reorganize.
Second.
I nominate Felix Rivera as chair.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I would like a legal briefing, if we can, on the necessity to renominate Austin Quinn Davidson as chair in order to maintain continuity in the mayor's office as we move through the reorganization. I just want to make sure we do the right thing.
Mr. Gates, do you want to address that? Although my gut tells me that we would just be nominating for acting positions. But let's not go off of my gut, please.
I'm sorry, I was reading something at the first part of your question. Could you repeat the whole thing again?
Yeah, thank you. I believe we need to actually renominate Austin Quinn Davidson as chair, but do we need to, or can we just vote for acting positions at this time?
That's an intriguing question, but I believe, the most logical way to proceed is nominate an acting chair and an acting vice chair. At the end of, I guess, Ms. Quinn Davidson's term in the seat as acting mayor, and when she returns to her seat as chair, things return. My reading of our charter, she returns as chair, and whoever was vice chair at that time. So right now, we're just doing an acting chair and acting vice chair.
Could I ask if Ms. Vogel is on the phone? Just so we have multiple opinions.
Ms. Vogel, we would like a second opinion.
Let me find out.
While we're waiting, Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like a refresher from the clerk on the motion to reorganize. Is it a debatable motion? Do the motion and the second mean that it has to go forward, or could we vote against the motion to reorganize and thus avoid what Mr. Constant is talking about?
Mr. Dunbar, the body could absolutely vote against the motion to reorganize, but there's no debate on it. No, you have to by the third Tuesday. Oh, yes. Mr. Rivera asked me to clarify in the record, the reason that you can vote this motion down, in my opinion, is because the code requires reorganization, but it doesn't require reorganization until the third Tuesday in April. So you would have to do it at your next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones.
Mr. Chair, can we test and see if Ms. Vogel is hearable? She was speaking.
Okay, perhaps that line was muted. Ms. Vogel, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Great, can we turn up the volume? All right, go ahead, try again, Ms. Vogel.
Yes, what I was saying is that I do agree with the advice of Mr. Gates, and that the appropriate thing to do be to nominate an acting chair and an acting vice chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so before we continue, so there was a motion, and do you want me to do that for the motion to reorganize? Just finish that, because
No, we did not. We have a motion and a second.
Could you do it? 'Cause I don't
Sure,
have a question.
yes, I will. Okay, there is a motion by Mr. Constant and a second by Ms. Zalatel to reorganize. And as we said, we do not believe that that is a debatable motion. So are the members ready to vote? Please vote. Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Okay, now we got to the part where I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, and that would be, are there any nominations for chair?
I nominate Mr. Rivera as acting chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zalatel. Are there any other nominations for acting chair?
Madam Chair. This
Yes,
is
Ms.
Crystal
Kennedy.
Kennedy, and I nominate Suzanne LaFrance.
I decline. Thank you.
Are there any other nominations for chair?
Madam Clerk,
Yes, Ms. Howard.
I'd like to nominate John Weddleton, please.
Are there any other nominations for chair, acting chair? Seeing none, the nominations are closed. The deputy clerk and I will pass out and then collect the ballots. And we will go into the back room because this is a secret vote. What we're going to do is we'll end up calling Miss Kennedy on a private cell phone. We will get her vote, and both the clerk and the deputy clerk will hear her votes, and then we will be back and we will announce the result. Ms. Kennedy, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Just to confirm for the record, we spoke to Ms. Kennedy and registered her secret vote. The clerk and the deputy clerk counted the ballots in secret as required by the code, and the results are that Felix Rivera is elected chair. Acting chair. Let me say that again. Felix Rivera is elected acting chair. Okay, so now the nominations are open for acting vice chair.
I nominate John Weddleton.
Second.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair, acting vice chair? Last call for nominations for vice chair. The nominations are closed. Would the body like to have a secret ballot on acting vice chair, or shall we do that for the record? Or we have to call Ms. Kennedy? Or would you like to have a vote of affirmation?
Madam Chair, could we call for a unanimous consent vote?
Yes, I believe that you can, Ms. Kennedy. I'll consider that a request, and is there any objection to having unanimous consent? Seeing no objection, will the members who are in favor of Mr. Weddleton as being acting vice chair please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? There's no opposition. Mr. Weddleton is elected acting vice chair.
John objected. If you listened closely, there was one objection.
All right, that completes our meeting. So next we have adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
We're adjourned.